On a December night in the Huachuca Mountains of southern Arizona, a trail camera tripped just after 8 in the evening. It belonged to a hobbyist who'd been running cameras in these mountains for years, quietly hoping for one particular animal. What walked into frame was a jaguar. Arizona's wildlife agency authenticated the footage, then compared the rosettes, the ring-shaped spots on a jaguar's coat, unique to each individual, almost like a fingerprint. The result was stranger than the sighting itself. This wasn't a jaguar anyone had ever recorded before. A brand new cat, walking into a country where its species was supposedly wiped out generations ago. Jaguars were deliberately eliminated from the United States by the middle of the last century. The nearest breeding population sits roughly 125 miles south, across one of the most heavily fortified borders on the planet. A wall researchers have measured as functionally impassable for an animal this size. And yet they keep arriving, one after another, for 30 years, walking north into a country that killed off every one of their kind. Nobody can say for certain how they're getting through. And the deeper you look, the stranger the real question becomes. Because it isn't really about how they cross. It's about why they'd bother at all. If mysteries like this are your kind of thing, go ahead and subscribe now. It takes 2 seconds, and it genuinely helps the channel keep making these. Alright, let's get into it. To understand how unusual this is, you have to see how thin the record actually is. For 20 straight years, from the mid-1970s through the mid-1990s, there was exactly one confirmed jaguar sighting anywhere in the United States. The animal had become southwestern folklore. Then, in 1996, a houndsman's dogs in southeastern Arizona treed what he assumed was a mountain lion. It wasn't. It was a jaguar. He photographed it and let it walk. 6 months later, in a different mountain range, it happened again. A second jaguar, a second set of photographs, a second animal that walked away alive. The following year, the jaguar was relisted as an endangered species in the U.S. Because rosette patterns are individually unique, biologists could finally count actual individuals. Since 1996, researchers have documented roughly 8 or 9 distinct jaguars in the American Southwest, each effectively given a name. An old male radio collared in 2009 who died shortly after. A dominant male first photographed in 2011 who held one mountain range for years and was later found to have killed and eaten a black bear. More cats photographed starting in 2016. Another shot by a rancher in 2018 after wandering back into Mexico. That's the entire record. Roughly 8 or 9 cats, over 30 years, across a country the size of the continental United States. Which makes the pattern hard to wave away, because jaguars were never rare here. They once ranged from Arizona and New Mexico through Texas into Louisiana and California, and were still seen as far north as the Grand Canyon in the early 20th century. Then we removed them, and the record of how is unusually specific. A trapper killed a female jaguar in Arizona in 1906 and sold her orphaned cubs as pets. A federal predator control agent shot another female near the Grand Canyon in 1932. And in 1963, a hunter killed a female in the White Mountains of eastern Arizona. Hold on to that last date. It becomes the center of everything that follows. That 1963 animal remains the last confirmed female jaguar in United States history. More than 60 years, and not one since. Jaguars were functionally erased from the country by the mid-20th century, not by accident, but by deliberate policy. Which is the first thing that makes today's sightings so strange. These aren't survivors of some hidden remnant population. There is no remnant population left. Every jaguar walking through Arizona today came from somewhere else, and chose to come here. Now stay with me here, because this is where it actually gets interesting. The next part is where we find out exactly what kind of animal is making this journey, and just how impossible the route in front of it really is. Don't go anywhere. So the first real question is physical. Can an animal actually make that trip? The nearest viable breeding population sits in the Sierra Madre of Sonora, roughly 125 miles south of the border. Maybe 200 cats, part of a larger Mexican population in the low thousands, concentrated much farther south. For a jaguar, 125 miles of desert is entirely survivable. Young males of nearly every big cat species disperse once older males push them out, searching for territory. And a single male jaguar here has been documented ranging across more than 500 square miles. The landscape helps too. This stretch of borderland is known as the Madrean Sky Islands. Dozens of isolated mountain ranges rising out of the desert like an archipelago, each one forested and well-watered. For a cat moving north, they function as stepping stones across a hostile sea of desert. That route has existed for thousands of years, and jaguars have been using it for most of them. So the distance isn't the mystery. The real problem is what we've built directly across the middle of it. It's worth pausing on what kind of animal we're actually discussing. The jaguar is the largest cat in the Americas, and the third largest on Earth, behind only the tiger and the lion, with the most powerful bite force relative to size of any big cat alive. One it uses to kill straight through the skull, rather than suffocating the throat the way a lion does. That's easier to believe once you learn that one jaguar living quietly in southern Arizona was documented to have killed and eaten a black bear. That's the animal moving through these mountains. Not a lost wanderer barely surviving, but a fully capable apex predator thriving in country most Americans picture as empty desert. Whatever is drawing these cats north, it isn't desperation. They arrive in good condition, hold territories spanning hundreds of square miles for years, and in more than one documented case, eventually walk all the way back to Mexico on their own. Here's where the story stops making sense. Roughly 2/3 of Arizona's border with Mexico is now sealed by wall, steel bollards up to 30 feet tall, with gaps of only a few inches between them, wide enough for a hand, not for a jaguar. A multi-year camera study across roughly 100 miles of border found an enormous collapse in successful wildlife crossings wherever solid steel wall replaced the older vehicle barriers. For large mammals in several stretches, the crossing rate hit zero. One conservation project has identified more than 150 individual jaguars living in the northern Sierra Madre, just south of the line. Of all of them, only a small handful are known to have ever crossed into the United States. Add a bulldozed patrol road, floodlights burning through the night, and a busy highway paralleling the border, and what you have is a layered gauntlet sitting directly across the only realistic route north. Every serious analysis says a jaguar shouldn't get through it. And yet one did, walking into that trail camera in December. Months later, another male was filmed 3 separate times south of Tucson, pacing the same ground. They're still coming. The wall is still there. Somehow, both remain true. Okay, if you've made it this far, don't go anywhere. Because this is exactly where researchers think they've actually found the answer. And it's a door that's being welded shut in real time as we speak. The next part is the most interesting piece of the entire mystery, so stick with it. The leading explanation is almost embarrassingly simple. These cats aren't getting over the wall, or under it, or through it. They're going around it. Roughly 80 miles southeast of Tucson, the mountains open into high-rolling grassland running straight up to the international line. For years, the border here wasn't a wall at all, just a chest-high barrier of horizontal steel rails, built to stop vehicles. A truck can't cross it. A jaguar walks straight underneath. That gap, and a small handful like it, may be the biggest explanation for everything we've seen. Described by researchers as the last significant opening for jaguars along the Arizona border, connecting the Sky Islands of Sonora to the Sky Islands of Arizona. It also explains a detail that puzzled people for years. When that dominant male vanished from southern Arizona around 2015, most assumed he'd died. Then, in late 2021, a Mexican conservation camera photographed him alive again in central Sonora, well over 100 miles south. 7 years gone, and he'd made the full trip home. One of the very few jaguars ever confirmed crossing the line in both directions. The corridor is real. It's currently being closed. New wall is under construction through the exact stretch researchers identified as the crossing point, and conservation groups have gone to court trying to stop it. If that opening shuts, the jaguars already in Arizona may effectively be sealed off, with nothing new ever able to come north again. But solving how they cross only exposes a deeper question, one that has genuinely stumped every agency involved. Every single jaguar documented in the United States since 1996 has been male, and the last confirmed female was killed back in 1963. A young male big cat disperses for exactly 2 reasons: territory and mates. Arizona offers him the first. As far as anyone can prove, it offers him nothing of the second. He crosses 100 miles of desert, threads a militarized border, enters a country where his species was hunted to extinction, to arrive somewhere with no females waiting at all. One state wildlife official put it bluntly: there's simply nothing pulling them north, because there are no females there. And why they keep coming anyway remains, in his words, a genuine scientific mystery nobody has a real handle on. The pattern is too consistent to be a fluke. For roughly 20 straight years, there was at least one confirmed jaguar record in the Arizona borderlands every single year. Roughly every 5 to 10 years, another solitary male pushes north and stays, sometimes for years, hunting, denning, holding ground in a country with nothing obvious to offer him. So what would explain it? There's one theory conservationists keep returning to. Every one of those males had a mother. Female jaguars behave completely differently. They stay close to where they were born, keep small ranges, avoid conflict, and once they have cubs, become extraordinarily difficult to detect. The fact that no female has ever been photographed in the borderlands doesn't prove there are none up there. It may only prove they're doing exactly what female jaguars have always done, staying hidden. Every male walking into Arizona is, in a sense, living proof of a breeding female somewhere within reach of the route he took. The nearest confirmed female sits less than 100 miles south of the border, and some researchers now suspect the real edge of the breeding population may sit closer than the official maps suggest, which reframes the entire story. Maybe these animals aren't lost or confused. Maybe they're simply doing what jaguars have done in these mountains for thousands of years, testing the northern country generation after generation. And the only thing that's actually changed is that we finally started photographing it. And it hasn't stopped. 2 cats in 1996, 6 months apart. Another in 2009. A dominant male in 2011. More cats across different ranges in 2016. An entirely new animal in 2023. Another male filmed 3 times in a single spring years later. Through all of it, the wall going up, the lights, the road, the cats have kept appearing, even as pressure on that landscape has never let up. Mining projects have been fought over for years in some of the exact ranges these jaguars call home. The U.S. has even designated hundreds of thousands of acres as critical habitat for a species that, officially, doesn't have a breeding population here at all. Researchers keep landing on the same conclusion. A cat that returns to the same watering hole for over a week or paces the same canyon 3 times in one spring isn't just passing through, it's finding exactly what it needs. The habitat is still good. The only thing that ever really left was the jaguars themselves, and only because we made sure of it. So the file stays open. We know they're crossing. We can identify most of them individually. We have a strong idea of the one remaining gap they've been using, and we're watching that gap get sealed in real time. What nobody can fully explain, not the state agency, not the federal one, not the researchers who've spent decades in these mountains, is why an animal would keep making that journey, toward a country with no mate waiting at the end of it, over and over, for 30 straight years. Maybe there's something out there we simply haven't photographed yet. Maybe the females really are closer than the maps admit. Or maybe a jaguar just knows what its great-grandmother knew, that the mountains north of the line are good country, and always were. What is known is that the Sky Islands are still standing exactly the way they have for millions of years, holding their water, their deer, and their oak forests above the desert floor. That every few years, something still moves between them, north, through whatever gap in the wall remains. And that on some ordinary night, in a canyon where nobody happens to be standing, a motion sensor is going to trip at some odd hour, and a cat that officially isn't supposed to be there is going to walk into the light, look into the lens, and disappear back into the dark.